All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off a Tuesday fitness and nutrition adjacent episode. Today, I'm going to be talking about 4 reasons to build muscle that are about more than just what you can see in the mirror. So before getting into today's episode, I do, as always, first want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. You certainly have no shortage of podcast content that you can consume these days. So I truly never, ever take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. One other note is that every single episode of the Help Me Understand podcast is sponsored by Feed Your Habits. Feed Your Habits is casual lifestyle apparel for people that believe that building habits is about doing the work, putting in the effort, and feeding your habits. They don't just grow on their own because they get fed. So go to feedyourhabits.com, put in my promo code in all caps. It's going to be JKFYH. Again, go to feedyourhabits.com, put in code JKFYH in all caps. You will get 10% off and also free shipping in the United States. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's topic. So as I mentioned right off the top, I want to talk to you about 4 reasons, and this is certainly not all inclusive, that I believe it is helpful and important, maybe even life-saving, if I want to follow what the algorithm and marketing should tell me to do to try to scare you into doing whatever it is that I feel like you should do. And if you know me even slightly well or think you might know me, then you know that I'm being super sarcastic right now because I'm not big on following all of the scare tactics when it comes to marketing. So overall, though, I do have 4 things that I've put together that I believe are pretty significant reasons for you to consider and continue building muscle. As per the usual, I like to provide some context into where this particular topic or any particular topic that I bring up, whether fitness related or related to anything else, is recently coming from. This is recently coming from a couple of different angles. So one of those angles is recently spending some time with both of my parents as they continue to get up in age, and just being aware of the importance of having muscle and how that can be so helpful in just movement and the ability to really enjoy life as we age. It's something that is absolutely inevitable as far as getting older. That's something that, Lord willing, we're going to be able to do and we really can't avoid. And I believe that part of that particular process in getting older is going to be potentially more enjoyable when you feel like you can function the way that you want to as best as possible as we do continue to age. I mean, as somebody who is on my way towards 50, I'm in my mid 40s. Can you stay mid 40s at 46? I think. Yeah. So mid to late 40s, we'll say. It's something that's definitely front of mind for myself. And based on what the statistics tend to tell me about the average listener for this particular podcast, I believe that the latest statistics that I looked at were saying that the average age of the majority of the listening audience, not all, but the majority of the listening audience, is somewhere in like the 35 to mid 50s range, I believe is what it was showing me. So I believe that this is something that's very front of mind there. And then also where it came into play recently too was in having a conversation with a client of mine who is really just all in on focusing on building as much muscle and maintaining as much muscle as possible, and really focused on that being the primary reason for her to really continue to put in the amount of consistent effort that she has. So just those 2 things are really front of mind. Certainly there are other, I'm sure, experiences that you yourself, whoever's listening to this, are going through too, or you may be observing this episode. If you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you passed it on to somebody else. So let's go ahead and get into talking about 4 reasons to build muscle that really don't have anything to do with aesthetics. Because at the end of the day, if the only thing that you're focused on is how your muscles look versus also what they're able to do, you're really selling yourself short. there's quite a bit more to it. So first, let's get to reason number one. So reason number one that I believe that it is important for you to build muscle that has nothing to do with aesthetics is going to be supporting actual longevity. So there are some statistics out there and even a specific study back from 2014 that concluded that more muscle mass can potentially equal a lower risk of early death. So this was a study that was done back in 2014. And what they did in this particular study was they took a little bit over 3,000 adults. And in this particular study, those adults were all ages 55 and up. And they took those particular adults and dug into data that was specifically related to how much muscle mass they had, as opposed to focusing specifically on the amount of body fat they had or their actual body weight. So they really specifically measured how much muscle each person had. And what they found was that when they followed those participants over time, they found that those who had more muscle mass had a significantly lower risk of dying from any particular cause. So the overall conclusion in this particular study showed that muscle was a stronger prediction of longevity than just body weight alone. And I think about this pretty often as I very regularly am in a casual conversation or back and forth with folks who, again, are in the 40 and up range for the most part, sometimes mid 30s, but primarily like 40 and up range, and talking about what they're currently working on right now. Where's their focus when it comes to their overall fitness and health? And I would say that conservatively 8 times out of 10, it's about losing weight and trying to lose weight or trying to lean out, versus the first response typically being about trying to maintain as much muscle as possible or even trying to build muscle. So this particular study, while certainly not the end all be all, I'm just going to be that person who takes one study and decides to use it to validate my point, that I do think that one of the main reasons that we're going to start off here with this episode to build muscle and have a muscle is because it can actually support longevity. So overall, older adults who strength train regularly do primarily also tend to maintain their independence just a bit longer. So one of the examples that I think about is talking to somebody who recognized a pretty significant milestone for them. They were somebody who was in their mid to late 80s, I believe, and they recognized a significant milestone for them when they were able to walk into the grocery store and they noticed that they no longer, or it wasn't the grocery store, they walked into a store and they had this habit of always grabbing a cart. And when they were grabbing the cart, it didn't matter if they were there for one thing or multiple things. They just always grabbed a cart. And it wasn't because they wanted to use it to carry everything. They used it for stability as they were walking around. So they've noticed as they've continued to build consistency with doing some very basic strength training, 2 to, I believe, maybe about 3 times per week. Also really focusing on getting in for them an adequate amount of protein, also making sure that they're drinking their water, staying hydrated, and then going for walks more often. They have been able to find that they've actually made some progress there, even in, again, I believe like in their 80-ish. I want to say 81, but don't misquote me on that. If you happen to be listening, you know who you are. So again, muscle being able to support longevity, I think, is reason number one, certainly not in any order, but reason number one why that could be really important. So just really think like the long game. And one of the coolest things that I've heard from one of my clients way back, we're no longer working together now. However, I remember when we first talked and I asked her why this was important for her now. Her goal was to build muscle. And she said, well, I just think that having muscle is basically like having a retirement plan for my body. It's like my body's 401k. I'm going to have to draw from it at some point. So I want to be able to deposit as much as I can. And I thought that was a really fantastic way to look at it. All right. Reason number 2 why you should build muscle beyond aesthetics is that muscle also improves your daily function. So when we're talking about your daily function, or even when I myself will use a term like having functional muscle, we're talking about being able to perform like day-to-day things. So things like carrying your groceries, things like getting up and down from being on the floor. If you have quite a bit younger kids, like kids that still like to play on the floor and things like that, or maybe even you've got older kids and you like to sit on the floor and put puzzles together and things like that, and then you're having to stand back up, you will notice, if you are not someone who has consistently done strength training and done functional movement type training, you will notice that it's like the whole, like, it takes 2 to 3 business days to get up off the floor. You got to put one hand on like the arm of the chair that's next to you, then you got to put another hand over on a table, and you're like slowly getting up, and it's like just kind of slowly pulling yourself up. Though I consider that to be like a day-to-day task. So things, again, like carrying your groceries, the whole, like, just carry it all in one trip, getting up from the floor, lifting up your kids. My kids at this point are 19 and 12, so I don't really lift them very often. In fact, not at all these days. But I think that being able to have the ability to just carry on day-to-day functions, and even something like I mentioned earlier with the gentleman that I was talking about, who in his 80s is now finding he's making improvement and being able to walk around a store or walk around the mall or whatever without any sort of assistance. Those are things that I think are really, really important. So it just goes to prove that muscle isn't just about what you can do in the gym. It's also about just how easily and efficiently you can navigate through life. So something to keep in mind here is muscle will really, again, a good reason to build muscle is that it helps to improve your overall function. And I will say with this particular bullet point, I understand completely that, like, the functional strength piece of things. And I've done earlier episodes, or a much earlier episode, talking about like functional training and what it means and things like that. It's not fancy. It's, to many people, it's not the super sexy stuff. To some people, I use sometimes this analogy of, it's kind of like the nice person, the nice guy, the nice woman that you settle down with, versus like the bad boy or like the crazy side chick, like whatever it might be. It is the stability, it is the foundation, and it also sometimes is just not the super exciting stuff. It's not the stuff that's going to get somebody to stop scrolling on Instagram because they see somebody doing like some real basic movement. But at the end of the day, it is about doing life better than if you didn't have that ability to do that. All right, so that was bullet point number 2. Let's see here. Bullet point number 3, muscle benefits your metabolic health. So when I talk about metabolic health, I'm really kind of coming from 2 aspects here. I think one from just the actual health aspect of things. One of the coolest things, as I was doing a little bit of research to kind of pull some notes together for this particular episode, that I came across is this study that was done in 2009 that identified muscle as the primary site for glucose disposal. And that is extremely important. So explained like very, very simply, glucose disposal, it basically just means how well your body clears sugar from your blood and then utilizes that for energy. So when you do have a good amount of muscle, and that muscle is also active and well trained, like you utilize it, and what happens is that muscle basically soaks up more of that sugar, which then keeps your blood sugar levels stable. And by keeping your blood sugar levels stable, that will also lower the risk of things potentially like, for example, type 2 diabetes. Now, I am certainly not somebody who's going to make a bold statement like it will prevent that from happening, it will prevent type 2 diabetes. However, it is certainly something where you can put yourself in a position to potentially reduce the risk or lower the potential risk. There are also other factors that play a role in things like that. So that's why I speak very carefully when it comes to things like this. I think still at the end of the day, more often than not, for your overall metabolic health, you're better off having muscle than not having muscle. I also think when we think about the term like metabolic or metabolism, I also think about just the fact that muscle is very expensive. And when I talk about very expensive, when we think about total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, and if you scroll back a few episodes, I did a pretty extensive deep dive into TDEE, what it is and what it's comprised of. One of the pieces that contributes to that is your your basal metabolic rate or your resting metabolic rate. Sometimes people will kind of soak those into the same thing. So for the purpose of this episode, to simplify, we will put them under I don't want to say same umbrella. We'll put them in the same seats in the bus. How about that? And when you are carrying muscle, then that muscle requires more energy expenditure to stay there. So that means that you can eat more, you can consume more because it requires more. It's more expensive calorically. So energy wise, it's more expensive to maintain that muscle. So that's something that can be really helpful too. So just overall, when we think about the benefits, one of the main benefits of muscle, and this is my 3rd out of 4 points here, just being able to connect that to your overall energy, your energy output and intake, and then also just overall blood sugar stabilities. Training for muscle is essentially training for your energy and your recovery. It's not just about the performance too. So there are internal benefits to building muscle. All right. And then last, because I'm trying to make this pretty efficient here, is just overall muscle helps you do more. And I know that I mentioned earlier talking about examples of functional type movements, like your day-to-day stuff. So you can run, you can play with your kids, you can carry your groceries, you can do different things. When it comes to travel, we're coming up on the summer very, very shortly here in the US. So the travel season is going to be in full swing. There can be a lot of lifting and moving bags and different things like that. There's a decent amount of spring cleaning. So there's moving furniture, there's getting out in the garden and doing different things. So while this may sound very similar to the other bullet point about being able to improve overall function, I want to bring it a little bit deeper than that, because as someone who has worked with both individuals and small to large groups in the training space, it's not uncommon at all. In fact, it's very common, which is kind of saying the same thing, for folks to have injuries that have nothing to do with a particular movement that they did in the gym. Very often, it can be linked to some sort of injury that was sustained outside of the gym. And the more that we can pack on that muscle, then we can put ourselves in a better place to possibly prevent that injury from happening, because you are, again, building stronger muscles. You're improving your overall joint health. So you get more joint support. Your muscles become more resilient. And also, God forbid, like if something does happen and you do get injured, you typically are in a better place to recover from that particular injury when you have more muscle than if you didn't. And earlier, I was talking about the gentleman that I had talked to who at the age of 80-ish was recognizing improvement in his own ability to function throughout the day because of having more muscle. And something that we also discussed was people that he knew who had suffered an injury, like suffered a fall, especially like suffering a fall where they break a hip or have some sort of a hip related injury, and how that vastly changed the trajectory of the remainder of their life because they didn't have a whole lot of muscle mass to support them when they took that particular fall. So if you are around my age group or older, you remember those commercials for, I think it was called Life Alert or Medical Alert, something like that, where the lady would say, I've fallen and I can't get up. And as much of a I guess, joke, for lack of a better way to put it, or as it's kind of funny as some of those commercials may have been, those are real situations. And when you get, back when I was, 9, 10, 11, whenever those commercials were playing, maybe 12, 13, maybe I thought it was funny at that time. And now I don't necessarily think that those commercials are as funny, because now I actually have some history and some experience with people that are close to me who have experienced things like that. And then also working with clients who have suffered injuries and things like that. So being able to make sure that you have as much muscle as you possibly can, and or in building, continuing to build as much as you can, is not just, again, about like being able to go through day-to-day life. It's also potentially going to save you and help you if you are to fall down or injure yourself in some way, shape, or form. Just have more resilience and more what my friend Mike calls bounce back ability. So the ability to recover from that. So just overall, muscle is going to give you more options because you'll just be able to do more, period. All right. So just a quick recap of the 4 reasons that I presented to you here today, where I think it's beyond aesthetics when it comes to building muscles. So first, we've just got overall longevity. Then we also talked about just being able to function better in everyday life. Also, some potential benefits when it comes to your overall metabolic health and your overall metabolism. So we talked about those kind of in tandem. And then last but certainly not least, just building more resilience for the things that can and potentially will happen in everyday life. So just as far as my personal take, like for me, I truly do believe that building and maintaining muscle really has been a game changer. And I'm not specifically only referring to how I look. It's been more about how I live. For those who are not like completely familiar, when I first got into specifically like going into the gym to work on building muscle, and really it's just going to the gym on purpose for any reason, because I certainly wasn't going in there to run. If you're familiar with me, you know that wasn't the thing that drew me in. One of the main reasons was just because I knew that there were certain habits that I had that at that time weren't going to really change as far as my schedule and my work habits and my sleep habits and things like that. And I just knew I had to do better in some particular area. So I figured fitness was probably going to be one of my best places to start, and taking better care of myself from a health standpoint, and also and doing that through working out. Because I was that classic person who would kind of notice, like, man, if we had to walk up a super high flight of stairs, I may have to take a break here and there. I noticed that, I didn't automatically think about doing some sort of a physical activity when there was free time. Like I would much rather just kind of sit around and watch TV versus, oh, let's go for a walk or go for a hike or go ride bikes or whatever that may be. So this is definitely a topic that I can relate to and connect to, and a living example of, because really focusing on building muscle was the catalyst to just taking better care of myself overall. Like that was really the thing that was like what do they call it? The spark that lit the match. Yeah, that was the spark that lit the match to then focusing on the areas that I thought I wouldn't really ever improve, but have made some progress here over the years. So improving areas like sleep and improving areas like nutrition and self-care and things like that. So that is what I wanted to pass on to you today. So what I'd like to invite you to do here as your takeaways is reflect on why you train to build muscle. So reflect on why you, the listener, the person listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, you who's watching this, reflect on why you train to build muscle. Like, what is muscle doing for you? Do you relate to all 4 of those points? Do you relate to a couple of them? I'd be interested to hear. You can definitely hit me up on Instagram. It's usually the easiest way, or my email is also in the show notes. I am also going to put a post on Instagram to go along with this particular episode. That's something that I am utilizing going forward here. Is there will always be an Instagram post to go along with the Tuesday fitness and nutrition adjacent episodes, along with this being part of the weekly email that I send out too. So if you happen to be one of the fortunate people who follows me on Instagram, is subscribed to my email, and also listens to the podcast, you are going to get a triple play of this particular topic. So also mentioning that if you're not subscribed to my email list, why not? Please do. You can find the link to that in the show notes. All right. So with that, again, if you felt like this impacted you in any way, I'd love to hear about it. Share this with a friend, a family member, anybody who needs to hear it, who either needs to get started or continue. Send this to them, and maybe it'll spark a little bit of conversation. All right. So with that, we are going to call this an episode. So thank you so much to listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.